I am an 80-year-old woman with a body that is slowly coming to rest, but a mind as sharp as ever. My memory is brilliant, perhaps a little too brilliant, as I tend to remember things I'd rather forget, like the day I encountered the Witch of Whispering Pines. This isn't a story I've shared with many people, and for a long time, I believed I'd take it to the grave. But the weight became too heavy for my bony shoulders, and all I want now is to spend my final years in peace. God knows I need that. I grew up in a small American town called Oakwood, raised in a middle-class family with 5 children. I was the youngest, and my parents and siblings spoiled me. We lived in a modest brick house on the edge of town, behind which stretched acres of dense forest. This forest was known as Whispering Pines, and had been the source of children's nightmares for generations. Even if you don't live near places like Salem or Plymouth, you've probably heard of the American witch trials. Our town wasn't far from some of the infamous sites, and we had our own dark history. According to local lore, a witch was hanged in Whispering Pines, and her angry spirit still lingered there. As a little girl, these stories terrified me to my core, and I always kept away from Whispering Pines. I imagined all sorts of grotesque creatures lurking in the shadows, and the witch herself as a gnarled old woman with glowing red eyes and teeth like butcher knives. I remember a day when I was playing catch with my sister Anna, and I threw the ball too far. It disappeared among the trees. Anna went to retrieve it, and watching the underbrush swallow her whole sent me into a panic. I was convinced the witch would come and take my big sister away, never to see her again. Fortunately, my fears faded as I grew older. In the fall of 1951, when I was 14, I no longer believed in the Witch of Whispering Pines. The stories I'd heard seemed silly and nonsensical, and besides, I was too busy with school and friends to let my imagination run wild. Still, Whispering Pines felt eerie, and I avoided the place, until Marianne Brooks, my best friend Patty, and I were challenged by Marianne to spend a night there. Marianne Brooks was a loud, spirited girl with long, slender legs and a mane of curly red hair. She had a deep voice with a booming laugh and seemed never to stop talking. Patty and I found her annoying, and Marianne knew it, so she made an effort to provoke us both. "I bet you two can't last a minute in Whispering Pines," she teased us one morning in the schoolyard. "You'd both be crying and running away." "Get lost, Marianne," I growled. "Oh, come on." She patted my back and nearly knocked me over. "It's not my fault you're such scaredy cats. You're just a tyrant." "I challenge you," Marianne grinned. "I challenge both of you to spend the night in Whispering Pines." My mouth went dry, the dam inside me broke, and all my memories of childhood terror surged forth. I began to tremble, and Patty put her arm around me. "See, you're scared." "Shut up," I yelled at her. "I'll do it." As terrifying as the thought was, I couldn't let Marianne have the satisfaction of seeing me so frightened. Patty looked at me like I'd gone crazy, but all I could focus on was Marianne's freckled face, shifting from self-satisfied to shocked. "Are you really?" she stammered. "You're going to do it?" "Yes, but on one condition. My brother comes with us." George was a year older than me, tall and stocky like a battleship. Despite his imposing appearance, he was a gentle giant, but he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty when needed. With him by my side, I felt much safer. "All right, bring George along," Marianne said. She turned and walked away, then stopped and looked back over her shoulder at Patty and me. "Oh, and I'm coming too. I need to make sure you're not up to anything stupid." "Laura," Patty whispered once Marianne was out of sight, "are you sure?" "No," I admitted. "But maybe she'll leave us alone if we prove we're not scaredy cats." I know now that this was a mistake in my own thinking, but consider this. I was young and proud, and my anger had clouded my judgment. Looking back, I realize it was the biggest mistake of my life to accept Mary Ann's challenge. I wish more than anything I could go back in time and change what happened, steer events in another direction. By telling you my story, I also admit my mistakes, and though I don't expect forgiveness, I hope you can understand why I did what I did. The plan was to set up camp in Whispering Pines and spend the entire night there, only leaving at sunrise. When I told my parents about the plan, they were skeptical, given my previous fear of the forest. I didn't tell them about the challenge. Patty and I thought it could be fun. I lied. Besides, we have George with us. It took some convincing, but eventually my parents agreed, as long as we didn't go too deep into the forest. I called Patty, and she told me her parents had also approved the trip. Everything was ready, and at 5:30 p.m. the following evening, George and I left our house with our tent, food, water, sleeping bags, and everything else we needed. We met at the beginning of the main trail with Mary Ann and Patty. Of course, it was Mary Ann who took the lead. "We'll camp in the clearing," she announced. "The tree where the witch was hanged used to stand here, but after she died, its bark turned black and the surrounding grass became dry and yellow, so the townsfolk chopped it down because they believed it was cursed." "You just made that up," I accused her. "No, I didn't, it's true." We walked along the trail in relative silence. I admired how normal Whispering Pines looked, with its towering trees and green shrubs. Birds chirped in the branches, and squirrels scurried through the underbrush. It didn't look like a cursed forest. Still, something eerie hung in the air, clinging to us like thick black smoke. Patty clung to my arm, her body stiff as a board, fear crackling beneath her skin like electricity. George kept his hands in his pockets, his face pale with tightly pressed lips. Only Mary Ann remained unfazed, hopping around and humming to herself. The sky was tinted with twilight and a misty purple as we reached the clearing. We set up camp, and I helped George start a fire. I avoided every snapping branch, every bird call. My fear of this place crept back in. Mary Ann noticed and began to laugh. "Poor Laura," she mocked. "I knew you wouldn't last." "Leave her alone," George said. "Look," Mary Ann pointed. "There's the trunk of the old tree." The four of us went to investigate. The trunk had dozens of growth rings, indicating it was very old. Mary Ann groaned and muttered, "It looks normal." "See? You made up this story." "Right. Okay. George waved his hand between us. "Let's just go back to camp." We cooked dinner and sat by the fire for a while, talking about everything and nothing. By this time, the sky was pitch black, covered by clouds, with no moon or stars in sight. Whispering Pines had gone silent around us, no crickets chirping. Patty nudged her knee against mine and whispered, "I need to use the bathroom." "Then go." "No." Patty shook her head. "I don't want to go alone." "Okay, I'll come with you." We apologized and walked across the clearing to a small thicket. I turned away to give my friend some privacy while keeping an eye on the flickering fire. George and Mary Ann huddled closely together, in a way that seemed a bit too intimate. The thought of Mary Ann hanging out with my brother made me nauseous. "Laura," Patty whispered. "Laura, come here." I looked. She stood on the other side of the thicket, and though I could only make out shadows and shapes, I could feel she was truly scared. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice breaking mid-sentence. "Come here." I walked over to her, turned on my flashlight and aimed it at the forest floor. I wasn't prepared for what I found. The largest buck I'd ever seen lay at our feet. His neck was bent at a grotesque angle, his swollen purple tongue sticking out, and pink, slimy entrails oozed from an ugly cut on his belly. I vomited, my hands clutching my stomach. Patty began to cry. She loved animals and couldn't bear to see them hurt. I put my arm around her and led her back to camp. "What's wrong?" George demanded, standing up. "Dead buck," I stammered over Patty's curly, straw-blonde hair. My brother took my flashlight and went to check it out himself. Patty and I sat down next to Marianne, who was intertwining blades of grass. A minute later, George returned, looking pale. "What the hell could have done that?" he panted. "A wolf or maybe a bear? I don't know." "Maybe we should leave," Marianne said. "That was your idea," I reminded her, though I wouldn't mind leaving this forest at all. "The body looked fresh," George said. "It could be unsafe." He was interrupted by a shrill, bloody scream from the direction of the dead buck. It was so loud that the leaves on the trees seemed to tremble. I clamped my hands over my ears and fell back, while Patty grabbed my arm like pliers and howled. George called for us to stay calm. Marianne jumped up and ran as if chased by every demon from hell. "Hey!" I shouted. "Come back, you coward!" "What the hell is she doing?" George roared. Patty screamed and pointed. George and I followed her gaze to two tiny specks of light floating between two trees. Realizing they were eyes hit me like a freight train, and my legs gave out. I fell to my knees, trembling, and George placed his hand on my back. "Stand up, Laura, come on, stand up." Behind the eyes came an animalistic hissing. It rustled in the bushes, soft footsteps that sounded like gunfire in the darkness. The thing approached, those eerily glowing eyes fixed on us. Slowly, a figure began to take shape. In the orange glow of the fire, I could make out a human form, but not much more. As George reached for his flashlight, I screamed at him, "No!" But it was too late. My brother aimed the light directly at the creature and shouted, "Run!" He, Patty, and I sprinted away. The horrible creature chased us, growling and hissing like a cat. I had seen it. In the split second between George turning on the flashlight and his shout for Patty and me to run, I had seen the Witch of Whispering Pines. How I could process so many details in such a short time is a mystery to me, but anyway, the image of this being is burned into my mind like branding on cattle. The witch was ghostly, pallid, with eyes that gleamed like twin stars, and a gaping maw full of jagged yellowed teeth. Frizzy hair clung dangerously to her scalp. Her neck was unnaturally long. Her back was so hunched she moved like a gorilla, bony, cramped hands scratching the forest floor. She howled, hissed, screeched, and giggled as she chased us. We kept running, screaming for help, though we knew no one would hear us. At one point, I lost my shoes. Sharp rocks, branches, and thorns cut my feet, but my fear drowned out the pain. My lungs burned. My throat was raw from screaming. I thought I knew true fear. How wrong I was. A root caught my foot and threw me face down. My nose broke. Hot, coppery blood streamed down my chin. George and Patty, who hadn't noticed, disappeared around a bend in the trail. Immediately, I felt the witch's hot, rancid breath on my neck. She twisted her gnarled fingers into my hair and jerked my head back. I screamed as loud as I could, but in vain. The witch pressed her dry, charred lips to my ear and hissed into it. I won't admit that my bladder gave out. The sharp smell of urine mixed with the witch's rotten breath, and I nearly passed out. Just as the witch closed her cruel teeth around my neck, George came running back down the trail, fists swinging, his face red and contorted into a hideous mask of pure rage. With a powerful kick, he struck the witch on the head hard enough that her neck snapped back with a deafening crack. The witch screeched and dug her claws into my back, piercing my skin. George kicked her again, and finally the horrible creature rolled away from me. "Run!" George shouted. I staggered to my feet, and so did the witch. Her neck was torn like the buck's, but she seemed unfazed, her eyes glowing, her lips twisted into an angry growl. "Run!" George roared. I ran again, howling hysterically, knowing my brother probably wouldn't come back. I caught up to Patty, who collapsed, crying and vomiting her dinner. We heard thundering footsteps and looked up to see a crowd of people coming out of town. One of them picked me up and held me close. My father. "It's okay, sweetie," he said soothingly, his usually rough voice gentle and calm. "It's okay." I tried to tell him that George was still in the woods with that thing, but I could only babble incomprehensibly, unable to form a coherent sentence. Luckily, my father seemed to understand. He handed me to my mother and followed the other men into Whispering Pines, each armed, storming in like soldiers into battle. Most of the town had gathered at the edge of the forest. I saw Mary Ann weeping in her mother's arms and wanted to yell at her for leaving us behind, but I couldn't. I knew she was the one who had alerted the townsfolk to our situation, and for that, I had to be grateful. From the forest came a hellish noise of screams and gunfire. Smoke rose from the treetops, and I swore I could smell blood. 5 minutes later, my father returned, holding a torn mass of blood, flesh, and fabric that had once been my brother. At that moment, I lost consciousness. George was buried in the town cemetery. He and 4 others died that night in the woods. The men had shot the witch until she retreated, hissing and bleeding. Our campsite was discovered the next day, all our belongings torn apart. Fragments of the witch's fingernails were found in my back. My broken nose never fully healed, and years later, when plastic surgery became an option, I chose not to have it corrected. I wanted to remember what I had been through, what had happened that night. My mother was catatonic for months after George's death. Mary Ann's family left town a year later, abandoning the massacre behind. Patty and I remained best friends, our bond deepened by our terrible experience. Years passed. I married and moved to Chicago, where I started my own family. I often visited my parents' house, which still held countless beautiful memories. But I could never shake the shock of what I had seen and the guilt of what I had done. To this day, I blame myself for my brother's death. Whispering Pines still stands today as if nothing had happened. I know the witch is still there. I wonder if she remembers us. I wonder if she knows that Patty and I are still alive. The wounds on my back left ugly, purple scars. On the anniversary of that night, they tingle and burn. Sometimes I have nightmares of that horrible face looking down at me from the shadows. I can still hear the sounds that creature made as it chased us. I can still feel and smell her breath. So, that is the story of my night in Whispering Pines. The story of how my brother died to protect me. The story of the scars on my back. I don't blame Mary Ann for what happened. She didn't truly believe there was a witch in Whispering Pines, and she couldn't have known what would happen. I haven't seen her since she moved away. I wonder where she is now, if she's even still alive. Does she blame herself too? Last week, Patty passed away in her old age. I returned to the town for her funeral, and after the mourners had left, I visited George's grave. "Take care of Patty when she gets to heaven," I whispered, "just like you took care of me." As I turned and walked away, I swear I felt a strong hand on my back pushing me forward, but it was probably just the wind. Although my grandmother never directly referred to herself as a witch, I don't believe there's a better word to describe what she truly was. She liked to tell people she was simply spiritual, and that she conducted tarot readings for the townspeople in her hometown of Ravenwood for fun. I remember occasionally overhearing my grandmother giving advice to the other women in the village, advice that often involved some sort of spell or magic. She regularly corrected those who called her a witch, insisting they simply call her by her name, Marilyn Grace. Raised by my mother and grandmother, I spent most of my life in my grandmother's house in Ravenwood, where I frequently watched her perform rituals, whether for luck or to ward off evil spirits like the shadow spirits. She used to say that you can never be too careful, and it's better to be safe than sorry. My mother was sometimes involved in these rituals and held some of her own spiritual beliefs, though not as deeply rooted as my grandmother's. Both my mother and grandmother always carried crystals with them. My mother wore hers on a ring, while my grandmother preferred a necklace she concealed beneath her blouses. I remember following my grandmother around the house every few weeks, as she sprayed every room with the contents of a black bottle she kept in a pretty wooden box on the living room bookshelf. I also recall sitting near her on Sunday mornings while she burned sage on the porch and recited the Lord's Prayer. Despite being raised by two adults deeply involved in witchcraft and spiritual practices, I was never truly someone who believed in things like evil spirits or placing a bowl of rice for good luck. Of course, I never argued with them when they performed these rituals. I simply sat back and let them sprinkle black salt on our door and window frames to prevent evil spirits from entering our home, helped paint the tree stumps white to ward off the shadow spirits, and drank the moon water my grandmother made each month. While I'm not the most spiritual person, at least not compared to my mother and grandmother, I often find myself doing things like hanging my broom upside down, placing a horseshoe above my front door, and wearing the talismanic sword of Archangel Michael that my grandmother gave me when I was about 8 years old, convinced someone was casting spells on me. It reminds me of her and makes me feel closer to her, even though she's no longer here. Plus, I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me feel safe. One thing that always intrigued me, however, was the story about the witch in the mirror. In my grandmother's house, there was a small closet at the end of the hallway that was never used for storage. The closet door was painted black, the only door in the entire house with that color. I was told never to go into that closet, which naturally made me even more curious about what was kept inside. When I was about 10 years old, I was playing hide-and-seek with some of my cousins when my younger cousin Rebecca and I decided to hide in the closet. Surprisingly, the door wasn't locked, and we opened it to find a single oval mirror hanging on the back wall. The closet itself wasn't very large, and barely had enough space for the two of us side by side without much room to move. When our grandmother found us, she pulled us out of the closet, slammed the door shut behind us, and dragged us into the kitchen, where she scolded us. After that was done, she gathered the rest of the cousins and sat us all down to tell us about the mirror she kept in the closet and why we should never go back inside. According to my grandmother, my mother, when she was 1 year old, had been targeted by a witch named Claudia, who was possessed by an evil spirit. While she didn't go into detail, my grandmother said that Claudia had repeatedly tried to kidnap and sacrifice my mother and regularly cast spells against our family. My grandmother recounted that when my mother was about 5 years old, she finally managed to trap Claudia with the help of some friends. And now, Claudia's soul was trapped in the mirror, where she had remained for years. As a precaution, my grandmother told us never to look into the mirror or attempt to contact Claudia's spirit. She feared that we might accidentally release her, unleashing great evil upon the village. My mother confirmed the story, and for weeks I begged my grandmother to tell me the spell she used to trap Claudia. But each time I brought it up, she became increasingly frustrated and angry. Eventually, I realized she would never tell me, and that there was probably a good reason for it, so I let it go. Over time, I forgot all about the mirror and Claudia's spirit, until a few weeks ago. When I was 15, my mother and I moved to Cedar Falls, and we visited my grandmother about every other month. The last time my mother visited my grandmother alone, I couldn't get time off work to accompany her. 2 days after my mother arrived at my grandmother's, I received a call from a neighbor informing me that both my mother and grandmother were dead. I rushed down to speak with the police, who told me that both had suffered heart attacks in their sleep on the same night. How could that happen? I didn't even have much time to mourn my loss, as I was immediately told to take over all of my grandmother's belongings and donate the things I didn't want to keep. I spent 2 days going through every room in the house, packing up all her herbs and random trinkets she kept in odd places. Some of my cousins stopped by, and I let them take a few things to remember our grandmother by. I decided to keep most of the stuff and loaded my car with as much as I could. As I took one last look through the house, I stood at the end of the hallway and stared at the black door. I considered leaving the mirror there, but I didn't believe my grandmother would leave something so important behind. So I grabbed a random bedsheet, opened the closet door, and covered the mirror before placing it in my car on the back seat. The mirror gave me an uneasy feeling, but I told myself it was just because of the stories my grandmother had told me. In the end, I decided to place the mirror upside down and kept it covered by securing the bedsheet over it with a hair tie. When I got home, I realized I now had a new problem. What should I do with the mirror? I knew nothing about maintaining a cursed mirror meant to imprison an evil soul, so after much deliberation, I decided to store it in the back closet of my house. I left the bedsheet on it and propped it against the wall. At first, everything was fine, but about 3 days after bringing the mirror home, I noticed the closet doors were opening and closing by themselves every few minutes. I woke up, walked down the hallway, and saw the doors wide open. I closed them and went about my morning, only to find them wide open again after breakfast. I rummaged through my grandmother's box until I found what I was looking for: the jar of black salt. I took it to the closet and laid a line of salt under the closet doors. The doors stayed closed for a few days until about a week later, when I came home from shopping to find the salt scattered all over the hallway and the closet door wide open again. I tried to remember all the other rituals my grandmother had performed to get rid of evil spirits and carried out some of them, but nothing worked. At this point, paranoia and fear began to set in. One morning, I woke up to find the bedsheet that had been covering the mirror thrown into the hallway, and the mirror now facing the hallway. I realized I didn't want it anywhere else in my house. After some online research, I tried cleaning the mirror a few times before bringing it back into the house and placing it back in the closet. I left it there for 2 weeks, and when nothing happened, I finally took it out and decided to set it up in the guest room. I found myself checking it regularly during the day, hoping something crazy would happen, but nothing did, and I thought I might have gotten rid of all the evil spirits in the mirror. I guess you know where this leads, and that I was wrong. I realized this when one night, I was awakened by the sound of a woman crying. I got up and peered out my bedroom window into the backyard below, but it was empty. Then I went into the hallway and my study, looked out that window and at the front yard and the street below, but there was no one. Confused, I went back into the hallway and followed the crying to locate the source of the sound. It eventually led me downstairs to the guest room. As I tried to open the door, I felt a sudden drop in temperature and wished I had brought my blanket. Slowly, I pushed open the guest room door and looked inside, but there was nothing there. I started to get annoyed and reached for the light switch, turned on the light, and searched the room. Then I finally realized where the sound was coming from. Standing in the doorway, I looked into the mirror hanging directly across the wall. A woman was blocking my reflection in the mirror. She was kneeling, head bowed, shoulders shaking as she continued to cry and sniffle. I could see she was wearing a black lace dress, but I couldn't discern any further details as her long brown hair hung over her face and most of her body. Slowly, I approached the mirror and stopped about a meter in front of it. "Hello?" I asked. The woman looked at me, and I gasped. I just stared at my own face, but not quite my face as reflected by the woman in the mirror. When she saw me, she stopped crying and stood up. Her face was red and blotchy, and she sniffled as she pushed her hand under her nose. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Are you Claudia?" I asked. She nodded, pushed her hair back from her face and let it fall over her shoulders. She blinked and tilted her head to study me. "You're Marilyn's granddaughter," she whispered reverently. I nodded. "So was it you?" "Was what I?" she asked. "Did you banish the evil spirit that has been possessing me all these years?" I asked, leaning forward with my hands on the glass. I didn't know how to respond, as I wasn't really sure what I was doing, and it obviously hadn't worked the way I wanted. It was strange, talking to someone trapped in the mirror. The reflection of the room could be seen around Claudia, but it was almost as if we were looking through a window or something. "So?" she asked, waiting for an answer. I nodded. "Yes, I guess that was me." "Oh, thank you," she sighed. "How long has it been?" 40 years, I replied. "And your grandmother?" "Dead." "I'm so sorry. And your mother?" "Dead?" She nodded slowly. "I know we don't know each other, but do you think you could let me out of here?" "What?" "Number. You tried to kill my mother multiple times. How am I supposed to know you're not trying to kill me?" "That wasn't me. It was the spirit that possessed me to do those things, but you've gotten rid of it," she said, as if she were about to start crying again. "Sorry, but how am I supposed to know that?" Claudia took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right. You have no reason to trust me. Besides, you don't seem like someone who knows magic, so I don't think you could free me even if you wanted to." She sounded sincere, but I didn't trust her. She hadn't seemed very trustworthy from the start, and she was right. I couldn't free her even if I wanted to. "Why do I look like you?" I asked. She shrugged. I stared at her a while longer, but began to feel uneasy about our resemblance. I left Claudia in the mirror for about 4 days before things got worse. I noticed random objects in my house going missing before they eventually reappeared in the strangest places. Lights would randomly turn on and off at night, and I heard footsteps and children's laughter in random rooms. Even Claudia began to seem frightened. "You're scared," she said one day when I walked into the guest room to close a window that had opened by itself. I didn't respond. "It's not me if you think that. The spell your grandmother cast on me prevents me from using magic." I looked at her and sighed. "All right, so what is it then?" She stayed silent for a minute while I watched her. "Did you bring more of your grandmother's stuff into this house?" she asked. "Yes, a lot of stuff like herbs and bottles with things, a few clothes, books, that kind of stuff." "Stuff she used for spells?" Claudia asked. "I mean, yeah, probably." "Then it's likely something you brought with you. Probably a spirit sneaked in with the things." I thought about it for a moment. What she said made sense, but I still didn't want to trust her blindly. "Okay, how do I get rid of it?" I asked. "You'll need some candles and you have to wait until night," she replied, looking around the room. I did as she suggested, and after the sun set, I gathered some candles and went into the guest room. I placed the candles a few meters away from the mirror in the room so that Claudia could guide me through the process. "Okay, you need to light these," she said as I set the last candle. I grabbed a lighter and then took out the jar of black salt. "What is this for?" Claudia asked. I opened the jar and took the mirror off the wall, instead leaning it against the side and surrounding the area around the mirror with a circle of salt. "That's in case you're lying and trying to escape somehow," I replied, putting the jar down once I was done. "I highly doubt you can free me. You don't even know how to banish a spirit," she scoffed. I ignored her as I lit all the candles. "You need to turn off the lights," she said. I walked over and did as she said, then returned to the mirror, standing between the burning candles. "Okay," Claudia whispered. "Once the candles have melted a bit, you'll drip some wax onto the mirror." "Why the mirror?" "Because it's already magical. You can use the magical energy to banish the spirit." I did as she said. "What now?" "Sit on the floor, look away from the mirror, and close your eyes. You might feel something touching you or breathing near you, but don't open your eyes." I sat with my back to her and did as she instructed, wiping my sweaty hands on my pants every few minutes. I tried to focus on my breathing and not become paranoid. After a few seconds, a strong, cold gust of wind swept through the room, followed by the sound of breaking glass. I forgot what Claudia had told me and opened my eyes to find the mirror completely shattered and the bedroom window wide open. All the candles had also been extinguished. "Claudia?" I asked. There was no answer, and I stood up and turned the light back on. I walked back to the mirror shards and picked them up. It was broken into 6 large pieces, and I noticed that the salt was now scattered all over the floor. I placed the mirror frame on the ground and put the shards back in their places, but when I looked into the mirror, I could only see my own reflection. Claudia was long gone. "Damn!" I shouted in frustration. "Emily!" I heard a voice call from outside. I went to the window and looked down to see Claudia standing in my front yard. She waved, and I noticed her face changing. I stared closely as it transformed from my face to one with dark gray, leathery skin that was heavily wrinkled. She had black eyes, deep set in their sockets and about the size of golf balls. Her nose was small and looked as though it was split in the middle. Her lips were the same color as her skin but were dry and covered in cuts. I watched her look up and followed her gaze to see a flock of crows descending around her, circling her for a few seconds before both the crows and she disappeared. Seconds later, all the windows in every house on the street exploded, filling the front yards with shards of glass. The streetlights followed, flickering a few times before they too exploded and went out. The street was plunged into darkness, and I noticed that even the moon and stars had vanished. I spent the rest of the night flipping through my grandmother's books and journals, searching for something that could help me, but nothing I read matched this situation. 3 days have now passed since that night, and the light hasn't returned. Some of my neighbors have tried to drive away in their cars, and the rest of us watched as they drove into the surrounding darkness, but they seemed to always disappear. The only evidence they ever left was the screams heard shortly after their departure into the darkness. I don't know if this will reach anyone, but I've run out of options. It seems like the days are getting darker, something I never thought possible. I can barely see the houses next door anymore. I just hope no one finds out that all of this is my fault. I hate to think about what would happen if they did. I know people who would literally kill me if they found out I put this online, but I don't see many other options. If I go straight to the police, there's a good chance I'd be blamed for what happened to my friends, and for a variety of reasons I'd end up thrown directly into prison. And I know at least one of them is still alive, and I need to find him. I'm a smuggler. I get my hands on items I shouldn't have and sell them to the fat cats who want the latest piece for their mantelpiece. The Salem witch tomb was probably the biggest thing I ever tried to smuggle into the States, but that was because it was a special request. The Salem witch tomb was discovered in the Appalachian Mountains, and to be honest, I don't know exactly why the buyer wanted it so desperately. But hey, my team and I wanted to make $1 million and thought we could give it a shot, right? The heist itself went smoothly, but the next day I got arrested because I was seen at the scene. That was all they had, but I was still held for 3 days. I'm glad they eventually released me without resistance, but the moment I returned to the hideout, I knew something was wrong. I could hear the flies buzzing. There was so much blood. On the walls, on the ceiling, it looked like someone had exploded in the middle of one of the bedrooms. I found body parts scattered all over the house, and the tomb was simply gone. What I saw would have made a weaker man lose it. One of my team members, Danielle, she had left her notebook behind. I was always on her about how she doodles in that damned thing whenever she gets the chance, but it helped me figure out what had happened. I have to find her. If I can't, or if I meet the same fate as my buddies, maybe one of you can. The item was successfully recovered. It's a 6x3-foot coffin made of blue-gray stone, covered with intricate carvings. The lid features a carving of a long-haired woman with outstretched arms, holding a chain in one hand and the other hand looking like a claw. I believe she once had a face, but time has worn it away. The sides depict various tortures and executions: drowning, stoning, burning at the stake, hanging, and more. There's definitely something inside. I hear something rattling as we pull it from the truck. Frank keeps bugging us with just taking a look, but if he even touches the lid with a finger, I'll smash that finger. We can't deliver damaged goods to the client. It would ruin our reputation. Not that he could lift the lid on his own anyway. The damn thing weighs a ton, and the guy is a cripple. Something's not right. Rick has been gone for over an hour, and he was only supposed to step out for a smoke. It wouldn't be so bad if he wasn't the only one who knows how to contact the client. Mike agrees that we just need to hide until Rick comes back. Frank is nervous, but he doesn't have the guts to actually bail. He doesn't even know where I hid our passports. Frank tried to lift the lid, just to look, and as expected, he almost broke his hand and cut his palm on one of the sides. Damn idiot. Mike tied him up while I cleaned the coffin. Frank got some of his blood on it, and I didn't want it leaving stains. I removed most of it, and hopefully the client won't notice. I think the heater is broken. Mike checked, but the temperature dropped from a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit to a freezing 63 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to get colder tonight. Time to pack up and think about the white sandy beaches where I'll be vacationing in my sleep. Wish I had some more trazodone left. I'm struggling to stay awake. Probably the cold. Maybe I'll get a real prescription when we're back in the States. I had some weird dreams. It was like I was walking through a story. Just a member of the audience, not part of the play. I saw a woman in a flowing emerald green dress. Her dark hair hid her face from me, but all she did was pick various plants and place them in her basket. At least at first. Then another woman stormed through the underbrush and fell to her knees. Compared to the woman in the green dress, she looked dirty and plain. I couldn't understand everything she was saying, but she kept pointing to a bruise on her face. Looked like someone had beaten her pretty badly. The wise woman in the green dress gently took her hands, and her voice rang clear like a bell. Come with me and live joyfully and freely. Spiders. I really hate spiders. There must have been a nest in the ground because Frank started screaming. And when we ran into the tomb room to tell him to shut up, we saw the spiders. Big ones that covered the lid of the coffin. I let Mike handle them because I have my limits. Tell me to create a distraction, blow up a truck, steal the crown jewels. I'll do it. Don't make me deal with damn spiders. More restless sleep only led to more strange dreams. I think my dreams were inspired by that damned tomb. I swear the woman in green looks exactly like the carving on the lid. She was teaching a group of women, at least that's how it looked. I still couldn't see her face, but the group devoured every word she said. The lesson was only for women, some as young as 10 or 11, and the oldest looked like she was in her 70s. The woman gathered certain plants or berries and quietly explained their uses. Then she pointed to one of the youngest in the front row and asked, "Are you ready for your baptism?" The girl nodded excitedly, and the others gave her plenty of space as the woman approached her. She took a stone knife from her belt, cut part of her arm, and held it over the girl's head. Scarlet sprayed against the girl's cheeks and tongue before I woke up again. I think I'll stay awake until Rick gets back. Still freezing. I'll kill Rick if the reason he's been gone so long is that he went off with some hooker. Breaking news. Big Mike is actually scared of something. Snakes. I went to the coffin to check, and to our mutual surprise, there were 3 big guys just lying on the lid. Mike screamed like a little girl and ran out of the room. They weren't even venomous types. I don't even know how they got to the coffin because they were tired and cold when I picked them up. The coffin itself is even colder, like touching ice. We shoved their scaly butts outside. I wonder if I should tell Mike I once owned a ball python. I must be hyped from the cold. Mike managed to start a small fire in the fireplace, but I swear to God, I saw a shadow while we were all trying to warm up near it. Like a shadow in the hallway, like someone heading to the coffin. I ran to the hallway and back to the tomb room, but no one was there. No one in the rest of the house, and we searched the attic down to the basement. Frank kept calling me paranoid, but Mike told me it was okay. When he was still in the army and patrolled late at night, he almost shot a bush because he thought it was an insurgent. When you're tired and anxious, it's natural to see things in the dark. It's now 55 degrees Fahrenheit in the house and dropping further. 5 degrees later, it'll be just as cold outside as it is inside. I was built for Florida, not for this. I found another snake in the tomb room, curled up in the corner. I didn't recognize the species and Google didn't help, so I'm not touching it. I'll call it Herbert. Mike thinks we should call it Satan. Frank called me paranoid earlier, but he's even worse. He thinks the snake came from inside the coffin. Damn, the damn lid probably weighs over 200 pounds. Not to mention it fits the box so well that a fly probably couldn't crawl out. Maybe Frank was right to be paranoid. I saw more shadows and started searching the house again. I swear I saw someone walking up and down the damn hallway, and I had to make sure. Frank went with me to the second floor. Still teasing, but I was glad not to be alone. On the way down the stairs, Frank suddenly just flew straight down, head first, landed on his arm below, and I heard a horrible crunching sound. Mike managed to set it in a loop, but we can't get real help, not now. We can't let anyone get suspicious. The police are still on high alert because the Salem witch tomb is missing. I hope what happened to Rick isn't what happened to him. Idiot, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So damn tired. I'm officially scared. This isn't the first time I've transported artifacts. Damn, this isn't even the first time I've moved something out of a tomb. But the shadows are whispering, and the guys can hear them too. I enter a room and hear a gentle voice. To me, it's just that. Muttering. But as soon as Mike or Frank enters the room, that voice becomes angry. Cold. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in spirits. It's officially colder in the house than outside. I don't know how I fell asleep. It's so damn cold, and the shadows are getting louder. I can't understand what they're saying, but I know they're saying something. My last dream. I don't understand it. The witch's house is burning. All her students are dead. Heads cut off. The witch herself kneels before a crowd, Her chest is full of arrows, her neck slashed, her legs broken in so many places. But her wounds keep bleeding, and she doesn't die. I finally get a glimpse of her face as two men drag her to a box. No, not a box, the coffin. She can't be older than 18. She's just a scared little girl who wanted to live peacefully with her friends. She doesn't know why she has these gifts. She doesn't know why she can't die. All she knows is that all her friends are dead now, and it's her fault. They throw her into the coffin, and before the lid closes, I hear her scream. We have to let her go. We open the Salem witch tomb. Everywhere, there are these strange snakes and spiders spinning ice crystal webs. It's cold enough that I can see my damn breath. The coffin itself is bleeding. I thought it was just leftover where Frank cut himself, but now blood is dripping from other parts of the coffin. Parts he didn't touch. It's time to free the witch, no matter the consequences. Rick, if you find this, your passport is under the sink in the basement bathroom. Leave the country. Run for your life. We opened the coffin, and for a moment, all that was left were bones. Dry, dusty bones. Then the lid creaked. Blood began to seep out from the bones. Muscles, veins, organs, skin grew back. The witch's hair sprouted from her new scalp, growing until it almost reached her ankles. Then her eyes shot open. Her colorless eyes. But she could see enough to charge at Frank. Her fingers turned into claws and slashed him as if he were tissue paper. He didn't stand a chance. She ripped his head off, and I saw her hand go to his neck as Mike threw her to the ground and shouted for me to run. I ran as fast as I could. I hid in the basement. I prayed that God had mercy on my soul, but the witch hasn't killed me yet. When she came into the basement, she was drenched in blood and holding Mike's head in her arms. I closed my eyes and prayed she would make it quick. She sat down next to me and stroked Mike's fluffy hair. Then I heard Mike's voice. How am I not dead? I opened my eyes to look at his head. The witch had pressed two of her fingers to his lips. His eyes wandered around, and his face was frozen in pure terror. The witch spoke, her voice strangely younger than I had imagined. Because, after I devoured the brain of the other man, I realized that I would need you and the woman. Simple knowledge isn't enough to survive in such an amazing and new world. She fixed her pale gaze on me. Narrowing pupils seemed to sprout from the center of her eyes as she focused on me. Help me, and I'll give this man a new body. She's now standing under the shower, not even a foot away from me. Without her eyes, she looks normal enough. Mike's head can't speak without her magic, but he's conscious. I can see the fear in his eyes. I don't know if she'll actually keep her word, but that's all I can rely on. Rick, please, save us. Don't play with fire. That's what the locals here in Ohio always say. At first, I didn't understand it, even though I knew they were quite superstitious. I'm a civil engineer and was recently sent by my company to Columbus, Ohio, to take on a major project, constructing a 27-story office building in the heart of the city. I arrived on a Friday, and the project was set to begin on Monday, so I had the weekend to myself. I wanted to explore the city and have some fun since it was my first time in the United States, but I didn't know anyone here. My colleague, Mike, was supposed to arrive on Saturday, and the other team members had booked their flights for Sunday. It was 6 p.m., and I was in my hotel room when the phone rang. It was Mike. Hey man, how's it going there? Tell me your first impressions. Hi, Mike. I'm not sure yet. The city looks beautiful, but I haven't gone anywhere yet. I'm still in my room. I wish I could go out with someone tonight and grab a few beers, but I guess I'll have to wait until tomorrow. I don't like going out alone. Why don't you try hanging out with some locals? Mike suggested. And how am I supposed to do that? Go up to random strangers and ask if they want to hang out? I laughed. try the local Reddit community. Create a post saying you're new in town and see if anyone wants to grab a beer or something." "That's a good idea, Mike. I think I'll do that. I'll taste the beer for you, and tomorrow when we go out, I'll know which ones are good, Loel." "Ha ha ha, do that, man. I have to go. See you tomorrow." "Bye, Mike." I hung up, opened my laptop, and went to Reddit. I created a post. "Hey everyone, I just arrived in Columbus for the first time, and was wondering if anyone wants to show me around or grab a beer. P.S. I don't speak Spanish, so it would be great if you speak English." A few responses came in, welcoming me to the city and wishing me a pleasant stay. Then this response appeared. "Hi, man. We're a group of Reddit friends who often drink together, and we actually have a meetup planned tonight. You're welcome to join us if you want. Send me a message for more details." I clicked on the poster's profile, took a quick look, and saw that he was mainly interested in cats, technology, and cooking. I sent him a direct message saying I'd love to join and asked for details on where to go and when to meet. He replied with the name of a pub that looked pretty nice on Google Photos, the Short North Tap Room, and said we should meet in front of the pub at 9 p.m. Then he sent me his phone number. It was now 7:30 p.m., so I took a shower, got dressed, and called an Uber. I arrived at the meeting spot 10 minutes early and saw 5 men in their 20s waiting outside. I took out my phone and called the number he had sent me, then watched as one of the guys answered his phone. "I'm here. I think I see you," I said, a bit confused since it could just be a coincidence in timing and calls. He looked around, spotted me, and said, "Yeah, that's us. Come over." I've always been an extrovert, but meeting a new group of strangers made me a bit nervous. I approached them. "Hey guys, I'm Ryan. Nice to meet you." "Hey Ryan, I'm Jake," the guy I had spoken to on the phone said. Then he pointed to the other guys and said, "These are Mike, Dave, Matt, and Brian." We went inside, found a table, and ordered a few beers. The guys seemed curious about me and made me feel like the center of attention, but not in an uncomfortable way. I learned that they were all students at different universities and had become friends a few years ago through Reddit. Matt was studying medicine. Mike was passionate about music and had already produced 2 rap songs. Brian was an avid gamer, which led him to skip most of his classes and repeat his final year, a fact that made me laugh. Dave was trying to become a bodybuilder, and that was obvious. I told them about myself, my job, the project we were about to start in Columbus, and my passion for horror. "Well, if you like horror, we have a haunted lake nearby. It's called Hocking Hills Pond," Matt said. After a brief pause, he continued, "They say witches cast spells there at night, and bad things happen if you go there. Even the animals don't drink from it." "Really?" I've always been fascinated by stories about cursed places, but never had the chance to visit one. "Where exactly is it?" I asked. "You want to go?" Brian asked. Jake chuckled, set his beer on the table, and said, "It's about 15 miles outside Columbus, located deep in the woods." Thinking about it, we've lived our whole lives here, but never thought to go there. What do you guys think? Should we do it after a few more beers? My first thought was not to go into the woods outside Columbus with a few guys I had just met 2 hours ago, but after some consideration, these guys seemed nice and harmless, and I didn't feel threatened by them. Plus, I had always wanted to visit a cursed place. "Let's do it," I said decisively, the alcohol starting to take effect at that moment. "Should we call an Uber, or how are we getting there?" "Yeah, let's go. That would be fun," Brian said, and everyone agreed. "Let's pay the bill and call an Uber." We paid for the beers, went outside, while Brian tried to set the destination to Hocking Hills Pond as accurately as possible in the Uber app. He had to do it manually since there was no exact address. "The Uber will be here in 3 minutes. I ordered 2 cars since there are 6 of us," Brian said. It was dark, and I felt so excited about what we were about to do. My whole life had been monotonous: work, home, occasional nights out. But for the first time, I was about to do something I had always wanted. I felt adrenaline coursing through my body. The cars arrived, and I got into one with Jake and Matt, while Brian, Mike, and Dave got into the second car. The Uber driver looked a bit suspicious and scared when he saw the destination, and Jake assured him that we were just a few drunk guys having fun and visiting the supposed haunted place, and he didn't need to worry. After 20 minutes, we arrived and got out of the car. It was pitch dark, and the headlights were the only source of light. The second car arrived a minute later as it was held up by a red light. We gathered and turned on our phone flashlights. Mike said, "We should enter the woods from the other side of the road and go straight for 2 minutes. Then we should reach Hocking Hills Pond. At least, that's what Google says." It was cold outside and an eerie silence that didn't feel quite right. Mike went first, and we followed him. We climbed a small hill and entered the woods. We made our way to Hocking Hills Pond, stepping over dead branches, and the leaves made a bit of noise in the deep, lifeless silence surrounding us. After about a minute of walking through the forest, the wind began to blow, and suddenly Mike screamed, "Damn, guys, stop! There's a dead deer over there!" A strong, rotten smell hit me. I felt like throwing up. The wind blew the odor directly at us. We walked past and held our breath, and as I stood next to him, I took a glance at the deer. Something was wrong. It didn't look like it had been attacked by an animal or shot by a hunter. It had no visible wounds, and even though it smelled terrible, it didn't look like it had been decaying for days. I knelt down and looked into its eyes, which were wide open, and blood trails were streaming from them. I placed my hand on its neck, and then I was shocked. It was still warm. Its entire body was still warm. I couldn't understand why the smell was already there if the deer had just died. I thought there must be another corpse nearby, and that the smell wasn't coming from this deer, so I took a deep breath. The previous smell was now 10 times stronger, and I can't explain what I felt. I can only say it was the most terrifying feeling I had ever experienced. First, I felt intense nausea, followed by a sense of horror. I wanted to leave, but my legs were now weak, and I felt like I couldn't stand up. My vision began to blur, and before I knew it, Jake grabbed my arm and helped me stand up. "What are you still doing here, man? I had to come back to get you. We didn't even notice you lagging behind. How can you stay in this stench?" he asked. "Something's really wrong with this deer, Jake," I said. "Even though it smells like it's been decaying for a few days, it just died. I just placed my hand on its body, and it's still warm." "That's impossible, man. Your mind is playing tricks on you. There's no way its body is still warm. You smelled that rotten odor. It's been at least 3 days since it died," Jake replied with a concerned expression at that moment. "Let's go. The guys are waiting for us," he continued. We made our way back to the group and kept walking. The air began to grow heavy, and the cold became colder as we moved toward the pond. We reached an area where the trees stopped and found ourselves in a small circular clearing with a pond in the center. The vegetation seemed dead everywhere. The pond had a greenish color, the color of sick water. The whole place looked so unnatural. I turned off my phone's light, opened the camera, and took a photo of it. It was my first visit to a haunted place, so I needed to have a memory of it. "So, no witches here," Matt said. "Mike, take a picture of me in front of the pond." Matt walked to the pond and sat with his back to it. "You're too close. Move a bit closer to the pond," Mike said. Matt took a few steps back and stepped onto a wet patch of mud. Out of fear, he unintentionally took a few more steps back and landed in the water. Well, damn. Now my feet are not only muddy but also wet. Matt had an angry look on his face as he came out of the pond and shook his feet, spraying water everywhere. And judging by the look of this water, you're going to stink too, I said. I'm not sharing the Uber ride back with you. I laughed. At this point, he didn't want to take the photo anymore and came back to us. Dave, who found the whole situation amusing, said, "Let's sing something. If there are any animals nearby, we'll scare them off and leave the area." I nodded. It felt like a good idea to protect ourselves from stray dogs or maybe even wolves. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could do it for a minute and then head back to the main road and call a cab, I said. I don't know any American songs, but I can be the judge of who the best singer is. The guys agreed on a song and began singing together. They were terrible. A group of unskilled drunk guys singing seemed so funny. I listened attentively to keep my promise and nominate a winner when suddenly I heard a beautiful singing voice. The voice was pure, music to my ears, and then it hit me and I froze. It was a girl's voice. A few seconds later, my new friends also heard it and stopped singing as they noticed it, one by one, but the voice kept singing. It began to speed up, changing from a sweet melody to an angry, fast-paced tune. The sounds grew louder, and it seemed to be coming from all directions around us. Now the forest was hit by a strong wind that blew all the trees away, and the voice started getting louder and louder. The song now changed to what sounded like a Latin incantation. The bushes around us began to move frantically. The leaves flew in the wind, which was now so strong that it was hard to hear anything else, but the voice was still as clear as before. Matt fell to his knees, pressed his head against his chest, and began to shout, "Nex adum immortalis, Book of Eternal Shadows, come forth and show yourself. Powers of ancient knowledge, open the gates, immortal hands free us." A strong smell of decay appeared, just like the one I had perceived from the deer, and it seemed to be coming from him. The voice now began to shout the same thing as Matt, and I didn't need an invitation to run away immediately. I ran as fast as I could in the direction we came from, barely seeing anything in front of me and hoping not to run into a tree. The guys followed me as I heard them running and shouting behind me. A feeling of cold and deep drowsiness overcame me, but I fought it to stay focused and escape the forest as quickly as possible. The voice was still everywhere, as loud as before, but the wind began to blow even stronger. I ran almost as fast as my body could and jumped over dead tree trunks, looked left and right to see if anything was in the woods, but there was nothing. At least, nothing visible. I saw about 150 feet ahead the row of trees end and knew I was heading the right way, and I was almost out. I looked back and saw Jake about 15 feet behind me and Dave and Brian about 100 feet behind us, still rushing toward us. "We're almost out," I shouted to the guys. A very loud cracking sound echoed in front of us. The noise scared me, and I stumbled. I stood up a few seconds later and kept running. A large tree fell directly in front of me, missing me by just a few feet. It was a gigantic old tree, at least 300 years old, and it simply broke in half. The voice transformed into an even angrier one, and the tone sounded like screeching wheels. At that moment, Dave and Brian caught up to us, and we kept running. We could see the road practically in front of us. A few more seconds passed, and we left the woods and reached the main road. The voice was now gone, the wind had stopped, and the air felt normal again. I sat on the road, breathing heavily, thinking about if I hadn't stumbled. I looked at the guys. Everyone was scared, no one could say anything. Mike took out his phone, opened the taxi app, activated his geolocation, and ordered a cab. We sat there in silence, waiting, and after 20 minutes the taxi arrived. We got in and sat quietly for the entire ride. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I just didn't know what to say. When we arrived in the city, we went straight to the police station and told them what had happened and that we had left Matt behind. Of course, they didn't believe us, but they proceeded with investigations. The next day, I saw on the news that a 23-year-old man was found dead at Hocking Hills Pond. Cause of death, heart attack. My phone rang. It was Mike. I answered. "Hi, Mike. What's up?" "Hey, man. I just landed in Columbus, waiting for a cab to take me to the hotel. Can you please send me the address again? I somehow lost it." "Yeah, I'll send you a location link right away, Mike." "Oh, I almost forgot. Are you—" The phone exploded with static noise. I looked at my screen, and it now showed a number I didn't recognize. After a few seconds of static, I heard a very faint voice but couldn't understand anything. I put my phone on speaker and turned the volume up to maximum. At that moment, I froze. It said, "Dead Call of the Immortals, Book of the Hidden Dead, come and show yourself. Powers of the ancient worlds, open the gates, let the hands of darkness act." I never imagined it would turn out this way, but somehow, it's hard to jot down the details when you're recalling events in the moment, reliving that particular experience. Everything feels so real. Everything just comes together. It's like remembering the events through a conversation. As the title suggests, this is all an assumption based on experiences. Evidence without a confession. My family has always had issues with the family matriarch, my grandmother, Eleanor. Growing up, I had a very typical relationship with her. She was indulgent and loving. But as I got older, everything changed. She just didn't seem normal anymore. No longer the average loving grandmother, she transformed into a very bitter, lonely, depressive, and downright unpleasant person. Now, I'm not sure if I should attribute this to aging and my young mind finally seeing her true self, or if she was always like this. Everyone in the family had their own experiences with Grandma Eleanor. She would sulk and cut off contact if someone had money and didn't share it with her, regardless of whether it was to pay bills. It didn't matter if someone had to move out as long as she was getting the last bit. She didn't care. She would cook meals but offer none to others. She would literally cry and cut off contact for a few days. No matter how much you knew you did nothing wrong by preparing a meal for the family while barely making ends meet, you still had to do her favor to avoid upsetting her. Instead of going out with friends, she would make you sit with her and do things you would normally do with friends. Now, she doesn't drink or smoke anymore. But if you decide to put friends aside and chill with her, she would literally sit there and watch every move with a condemning look that makes you feel utterly uncomfortable. She could literally drain the energy and joy from an entire room. After spending time with her, you'd usually feel exhausted and want to sleep the rest of the day to recover. As unimportant as this point may sound, it's a major red flag for most of us. What makes this so frightening for me and my mother is that many men have called my grandmother a witch. My brother's father, his grandfather, my father, my uncle, and a few others I'm skipping. We brushed it off as if it were a joke. Maybe that was the intention. Things only started to become really apparent in early 2017. My great-aunt Mary passed away at an old age due to some complications. She was 95, so it wasn't a huge shock. Mary came from a small, old-fashioned town called Salem Hollow in Massachusetts. Here in America, there are similar places where old traditions and superstitions are still very much alive. Witchcraft, or black magic as it's called, is a big topic here, so conversations about black magic and the like weren't unusual for me, until the point where I thought it was normal. The topic of black magic is important here because it helps drive the story forward. My grandmother always talked about how my great-aunt practiced black magic. Since my grandma was raised by her, I'm not sure if she left out much. It was mentioned that she used cards from a regular deck, a Ouija board under her aunt's bed. Oh, when I first became pregnant, before I even knew I was pregnant, my grandmother and I traveled from Salem Hollow to Boston to pack some things for my aunt, as her health was declining, and she would be moving to the city so the family could visit her more easily. We were cleaning and packing when I came across a pair of shoes that had a compartment. I could hear something jingling, so I turned them over to empty them, and a plastic fetus fell out. Something they might have used for demonstration purposes. A quick Google search confirmed this. But the strange thing was that a thumbtack was stuck inside. Why? A few days later, I felt compelled to take a pregnancy test because, of course, I had the symptoms. It turned out I was about a month pregnant. How that connected, I have no idea, but my mother and I were both freaked out. It's like all these strange things fit together, but none of us can come up with a logical explanation. But back to the story. So, by March 2017, my Aunt Ingrid died. My grandmother was the one constantly shuttling back and forth between the hospital and the nursing home, where our aunt was being moved from place to place. Over the weeks, I started to see worry in her eyes. I finally asked, "Grandma, what's been going on with you lately?" I asked nervously. I knew this could quickly spiral into a depressive abyss. I didn't want to talk about it, but Annie told me that as soon as her head gets cold, everyone would see me for who I am and turn against me, and I wouldn't have anyone anymore. What does that mean? She had tears in her eyes, and all I could do was swallow my shock. I had no answers. It clicked in my head, but maybe I was just scared and paranoid. As expected, everything started to change when our aunt died. Grandma tried to get closer to us. She started cooking a lot more and offered us meals. She said that since I now had a baby, she wanted to help in some way and take a task off my plate. I was so relieved. One afternoon, she called me to pick up my meal delivery, as she called it. I had a plate for my mother and one for myself. When I finally got home and sat down, I immediately dove into the plate. Man, I was so hungry, and it tasted so good. Damn, why was it so good? She had made baked chicken, boiled carrots, and green beans. As I ate the carrots, I felt an unwanted, familiar texture in my mouth. As I started to pull them out, I encountered long strands of hair that seemed knotted together. I thought it was an honest mistake and kept eating. After all, she is my grandmother, so it didn't matter. But I had a nagging feeling about it for days until it faded into a forgotten memory. Fast forward to May 2017, Mother's Day. The few family members who wanted to be there gathered at my mother's house in Maplewood to celebrate and spend time together. To my surprise, my very reserved Aunt Erica decided to show up. It was a great time. As things began to calm down, my aunt and I thought we would retreat and spend some quality time together. Just vent, talk, share memories, our usual. We talked about many random things when the conversation suddenly took a turn, and my aunt started talking about how strange my grandmother made her feel. It was a completely unfounded topic, and to this day, I can't remember how we got there. My aunt continued to say how chaotic her household was when her husband was transferred to Texas. She argued with her children, distanced herself from everyone, and was just unhappy everywhere. She said she had been cleaning vigorously, but to no avail, and felt and knew that something was tearing her family apart. It gets even stranger. As she was about to finish her beer, she grabbed her phone and stared at it blankly while saying, "For some reason, I remembered the necklace and bracelet that Mom sent to Auntie for her birthday the year before all this. I went out to look for them. You know I don't wear jewelry, so I left them in the bag she sent them in. Something told me to hold the bag up to the light, and I saw a face in it. I took a picture of it and I just don't know what to do, she said, still staring at her phone. My curiosity got the better of me, so I asked her to show it to me. After much back and forth, she finally showed it. As I mentioned, she's very reserved. Anyway, it was like broad daylight. It looked like a demon, up to the shoulders with the angriest face. It was unmistakable. I didn't even have to look closely. Exactly. There. At that time, we were on our way back, and the few turns we had to make to return to my mother's house were filled with complete silence. When we got back, everything ended, and I nervously waited for Grandma to leave so I could discuss everything with my mother. We all sat in the living room, and I started telling my mother what had happened. We showed her the picture. It was almost as if the three of us were seeing it for the first time. Complete shock and silence. Finally, my mother spoke up. The weird thing is, remember that plate you brought the other day? I found hair in mine. Not just a normal old strand, it was long and had other strands tangled in it. Disbelief crossed my face. No, I found hair in mine too, and they had knots in them. Shut up, she exclaimed. We all laughed nervously, and before I knew it, we all jumped up and went outside to calm down. What is really going on here? Are we all crazy? While we were standing outside, we all got scared at the same time. My mother's phone was ringing. It was Grandma Eleanor. I don't feel like talking, my mother said as she took a strong drag from her cigarette. The phone rang a few more times, then silence fell again. Damn, terrifying again. My aunt's phone was ringing. Who was it? It was Grandma Eleanor. We all stared silently at her screen until it finally stopped. The relief didn't last long because, what do you see? My phone is ringing. Who is it? It's Grandma Eleanor. I didn't answer either, and that was the end of it until about 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my brother Luke. I answered excitedly, ready to ease some of the tension, only to hear him ask if everything was okay. Of course, everything's fine, we're just relaxing. He continued, saying, Grandma called me in a panic and said that you're not answering her. She wanted to know why is still here and what you're doing. What the hell? As far as she knew, my aunt had gone shortly after her. How did she know she was still here? Why was she so panicked and trying to find out what we were doing? To add to this, my grandmother told me things like how her ex-husband's wife tried to stick something in her shoe and she almost lost her toe. But as she says, I knew how to fix it, I know how to fix people. She had her friend Maria, who was from Spain, make the necklace for my aunt. Maria, by the way, makes jewelry, but Maria was also invited by my grandmother when I was a teenager. I was going through a tough time and did very strange things. She blessed my room in German while waving sage around. They placed an egg behind the toilet. If it bubbles, you have enemies. My other aunt's husband used to tell me, when they were at my great aunt's in Salem Hollow, that one of our cousins asked my grandmother, "Do you remember when we went to that lady in Ohio and tried to get Aunt to leave that man?" without knowing that this man was right there in the same room. He chimed in and asked what they were talking about, only to be met with blushing faces and silence. My brother's father once got drunk and randomly called my grandmother saying, "I heard you're a witch." When I started talking to my brother about it, he said his grandfather had casually told him that our grandmother was a witch. He was young then, so he dismissed it as crazy old man nonsense. In the year 2006, my then-girlfriend Melissa had been urging me for months to go camping for a weekend along the Appalachian Trail, since we lived relatively nearby. We planned an overnight trip for the following weekend and quickly put together a schedule. We should have packed the day before, but by the time we were finally ready, it was already late in the afternoon. I'm an experienced camper and knew that the sun would be setting just as I thought we would arrive. However, Melissa was determined to leave, so we loaded our heavy backpacks and our dogs into the car and set off. We had to drive a certain distance to reach the starting point of the Appalachian Trail, and indeed, the sun was already just about to set when we arrived. We parked in the trailhead parking area and began unloading. It made us nervous that a man was simply sitting in his car in the parking lot. The engine was running, but he wasn't doing anything, just sitting there. We took our time, hoping he would drive away, because it was unsettling to see a stranger there while two women were preparing to hike into the woods. What made it even more eerie was that with the setting sun, we wouldn't be far enough from the parking lot to feel safe. We tried to wait for the man to leave, but he remained there with the engine running, doing nothing. As daylight faded, we couldn't wait any longer and set off on the trail with our dogs. We hiked for a while, seemingly not far from the road, as we could hear traffic noise the entire time. Just before we had to stop for the night due to darkness, we came across a shelter where 3 or 4 people were camping and cooking dinner. They were young and friendly, at least one girl among them. We greeted them briefly and hiked a few hundred meters further, where another campsite was visible a bit off the trail. We continued on but lost the trail because it was too dark to find our way back. Melissa wanted to keep going, but I was very afraid we would lose daylight before we could find wood and set up our camp. So I took the lead, and we returned to the abandoned campsite. At least we were near other campers in case something happened. I set up the tent while Melissa began searching for firewood. It was strange because we lived nearby, and it hadn't rained recently, but everything on the forest floor was wet, including the wood and kindling. Then we panicked when we realized we might not be able to start a fire. The sun was quickly disappearing. Fortunately, I had a roll of toilet paper with me, so Melissa tried to start a fire with it while I hurried through the woods searching the logs for as dry wood as possible. All the wood was so wet that Melissa struggled to keep even the smallest pieces burning longer. We switched tasks, and I began trying to maintain the fire as best as I could, but it was difficult. The fire just wouldn't catch. After a while, as we wandered through the dark forest, our headlamp began to dim, and then our flashlight. We realized we had forgotten to insert new batteries. I went into full survival mode because the toilet paper was running out. I now wonder how I wasn't scared at all to grab things with my bare hands or step into a massive spider web. I just had to find enough relatively dry wood to get the fire going before the headlamp went out. Like a machine, I gathered handfuls of the driest sticks and wood pieces I could find, placed them at the fire site, and ran back to reach the end of the headlamp. After much sweat and tears, we managed to start the fire and eventually built enough warmth to boil water. We celebrated our success with a bit of beer we had brought in a bottle, but then we quickly realized we had forgotten something important: utensils. It was dark and we were quite hungry, so I improvised and stirred our food with a stick. Then we ate our meal with our hands like savages, feeling really silly for forgetting the forks. After cleaning up, we sat by the fire with our beer and relaxed. Everything around us was peaceful, and the dogs slept soundly. We let the fire burn down and went into the tent, where we shared some intimate moments before falling asleep. Around 3 a.m., I woke up for no apparent reason, no noise or anything, but Melissa was awake and quietly panicking beside me. When she saw I was awake, she whispered that she was scared and we should just listen, so I did. At first, I heard the sound of the road in the distance, then night insects. But then I heard 2 very strange things that made me nervous. The first was the sound of thick branches snapping in the nearby woods, but no other rustling, like I would associate with deer or even wild boars. Based on the sound and volume of the branches, these were large branches, about 3 inches in diameter, so whatever was breaking them must be large. But why couldn't we hear any movement through the underbrush and leaves? It was completely silent, and then, boom, as I lay there feeling increasingly scared and vulnerable in the tent, I heard another noise, one after the other, but it sounded exactly like stones falling through the trees, just like a solid rock block tumbling down a tree with clack, 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 as it hit branches on the way down. I'm a scientist, a skeptic, and usually a very logical person, but I have to say I was really frightened. I tried to be rational with myself and said, "Oh, you're just being silly and scaring yourself. They're acorns." Of course, just acorns. Acorns, simply acorns. It was also a relief that the dogs were outside and not barking, but honestly, with the strange feeling and all the weird noises coming from all directions around our campsite, I have no idea how the dogs weren't disturbed by it. We spent an uneasy hour listening to these sounds, and because we were a bit scared that the man in the parking lot might have had bad intentions and possibly followed us, we felt too vulnerable in the tent. We managed to rekindle the fire by stoking the embers and stayed awake, drinking the rest of our beer to calm our nerves until the sun rose. The next day, in an attempt to make the previous night seem less frightening, I searched everywhere at the campsite for acorns. I couldn't believe it, but there were none. None of the surrounding trees were oak trees, but a type of evergreen. I also didn't find any pine cones. Honestly, I really wanted a creepy explanation and couldn't find anything that could explain all the noises I heard the entire night. We both agreed that we had experienced something reminiscent of the Blair Witch films and quickly packed our things to leave the next morning. Throughout the entire drive back, we talked about how scary and strange it had felt, but neither of us could figure out how such large branches could be breaking around us without any other signs of movement. What the heck was falling through the trees if it wasn't acorns or pine cones? To make the whole situation even creepier, we searched online for the section of the Appalachian Trail where we had camped and discovered that there had been 2 series of gruesome murders there, 10 years apart. The murdered women were lesbian couples who had also gone camping, just like Melissa and me. The first murders occurred in 1986, the next in 1996, and the year Melissa and I camped in that area. The closer we got to the resolution, the clearer it became that we might have stumbled into an old witch mystery that had remained unsolved in the Appalachians for decades. Stories about cursed forests and vengeful spirits suddenly seemed more than just legends. We decided never to return to that forest and to keep the eerie memories to ourselves, but the feeling of being watched stayed with us long after we returned. The legend said that a witch named Elfrida of the Shadows lived in these woods in the 17th century. She was known for her powerful spells and, after her death, was accused of cursing the villagers. Her spirit was said to still wander the Appalachian forests, seeking justice or revenge. During our drive back, we couldn't shake off the eerie atmosphere of the forest. Occasionally, we would catch shadows moving between the trees, or hear the faint whisper of the wind weaving into the old witch stories. The memories of the screams of the murdered couples and the constant presence of the man in the parking lot made it hard for us to sleep at night. When we finally arrived home, we decided not to tell anyone about our experiences. But sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees, I wonder if Elfrida of the Shadows still watches over the Appalachians, and if she will one day lure more hikers into her cursed woods. That night on the Appalachian Trail remains a haunting experience for us to this day, constantly reminding us of the old legends and the dark secrets that lie deep within the American forests. It's unbelievable. Where should I even start? Mike is dead, and Sarah. Damn, they're all dead except me. All because I had to pee. What the hell, man? We were camping near the trails of Mount Hood in Oregon. Thought we'd make one last trip to the bathroom before the snow blankets the Rockies tomorrow. It was Sarah's idea. She wanted to celebrate something. I can't even remember what it was at this point. And we all agreed it would be fun. Something we could tell stories about later. I hate that we were half right. We hiked up with a lot of gear, food and beer, and everything was great for the first few hours. But once the sun set and darkness enveloped the mountains, things started to go to hell. At first, we thought we were just too drunk, hearing things and silently agreeing to ignore it, pretending everything was okay. But it eventually got to a point where we couldn't keep pretending and decided it would be better to leave immediately. So, we started packing up. But I had to pee, and I mentioned it before heading into the darkness behind the trees, pretending to ignore the sounds echoing between the peaks. A mix of laughter and screams, and a strange, piercingly high howl, like the wind cutting through pine needles. That peeing saved my life. I had just overcome the shock when I heard it. It sounded like Mike saying, "Who the hell are you?" And then a more urgent voice, maybe Jake or Sarah. "Hey, are you okay?" Then a concerned voice, Tim's. "I think she might be injured. Hey, are you all right?" There was silence for a while, and then someone called out, and I couldn't identify the next voice. "Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye, goodbye." Confused, I peeked around the tree trunk, half expecting to see something messed up, and sure enough, I did. There stood an old woman near the fire. She wore a yellowish tattered dress, her hair hanging in strands and limp around her pale face. Her face was unsettling. She grinned from ear to ear, and her eyes were deep black. She looked like a damn witch, an actual demonic creature of the night. She laughed and then said, "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye." Tim, Jake, and Mike were the first to go. They just exploded, burned, flames reaching up to 25 feet high. Their screams were godless. I've never heard anything like it and hope never to experience it again. And the smell, damn, it was awful. I saw their skin blistering and separating from their bones in large patches of tendons and flesh. The fire was so hot that all their blood vaporized with an ominous hiss. When the flames finally died down, 3 unrecognizably burned bodies fell, disintegrating into ash blown away by the wind. Mike and Jake turned to run, and they almost made it, but she pointed at them, and suddenly they stopped, frozen in place, mouths wide open, tongues hanging out. Somehow, she had stunned them just by pointing. She croaked, it was disgusting, and looked over her shoulder. From the tree gaps emerged a huge figure. It looked like the unborn child of Bigfoot and a hellish elk. For a moment, nothing happened, and then chaos. The horned one charged forward toward Mike and Jake, snorting, screaming. He reached Mike first, piercing him with the horn and lifting him high into the air. Mike slowly slid down. His mouth was open, but no sound came out, only a red-tinted saliva stream. The horned one swung his head to the left, and Mike flew off, hitting a nearby tree hard. But he wasn't dead yet, and I saw him crawling, a stream of his entrails trailing behind him, steaming in the night air. The horned one took 3 steps forward and stood right next to Mike's head, lifted a horned foot, and struck it down and down and down, shattering his skull and mixing the brain tissue. And when the horned one finally turned around, only a bloody mass and one eye remained from Mike's face, perfectly intact, the blue iris staring blankly into the stars. Jake was next. He couldn't move, and I saw his eyes spinning wildly, full of fear, trying to find an escape, and then he stopped. Right on me. And I knew he had seen me hiding, watching. I stepped back a bit behind the tree, peeked out, flinched as the horned one grabbed Jake's arms, pulling and not stopping. I heard a loud bang, then another. Jake's arms were being dislocated. But the horned one kept pulling, and I couldn't look away. I saw Jake's arms being ripped directly from his body, completely cleanly torn off, but he couldn't move. He just stood there like a sick phallus, blood pulsating from both holes. The horned one pulled his left arm back and swung a punch to Jake's face, breaking his nose, throwing him backward, and, before he touched the ground, I could see he was dead. Job done, the horned one turned back to the witch, and she shook her head, saying words that almost made me lose it. There's still one, hiding over there, watching. I think he's amused. Oh damn, I screwed up. Why lie? I froze for a moment, unable to fight or flee, and then this sound, mechanical, recognizable, and a guy with a damn ridiculous gas mask raced through the trees on a damn Harley-Davidson motorcycle, headlights blinding, engine roaring. He literally came out of nowhere. I blinked, ready to stand up, ready to run, but before I could, something flew over me. Something big, four-legged, a dog, a huge damn dog. There was a roaring sound, and I realized the guy with the gas mask had fired a shotgun while the dog barked beside him. The shots were incredibly bright, illuminating the entire area with a strong fluorescent glow. Suddenly, the dog took off, close to the ground, straight toward the horned one, leapt up, and grabbed his arm. The guy with the gas mask reloaded, then swung the shotgun quickly at the witch and fired again, hitting her 4 times in the chest, making her stumble back and scream. Next to her, the dog tore at the horned one, pushing him back into the trees. From the motorcycle now, the guy with the gas mask swung the shotgun over his back and grabbed a pistol from his belt, fired the entire chamber and shouted, "Hocus pocus, you bastard!" And the witch fled. The horned one followed immediately. The dog chased after them, barking loudly. I heard a loud, horrifying horn call, like a dying elk, and something big crashed to the ground. The guy with the gas mask whistled, high, low, in between, and, after a few seconds, the dog broke through the bushes, panting, covered in blood and entrails. It looked like he was grinning. He trotted up to the man, and he bent down, patted him once, twice on the head, and I heard him mumble, "Good boy?" "Ah," I said, and the guy with the gas mask looked up at me as if he had forgotten I was there. "Oh," he said, "yeah. Shit, you better run." Behind me, I heard the witch's laughter rise again, weaker, staggering. The dog growled, crouched low, hair on his neck standing up. The man pulled some shells from his pocket, reloaded, and cocked his shotgun, then repeated, "Run, we'll handle it." And I did. I ran, and I ran damn hard, made it back to the car, heard the shotgun firing behind me and screams and howling. No laughter, though. Right now, I'm on my way to report this, hoping damn well they'll believe me. But I don't even know if I damn well believe what happened. That guy, that dog, that damn witch bitch, and the horned one. What the hell just happened? You haven't seen anything yet.